All right, Unit 7, we're going to talk about how to manage teams. In this unit, we'll discuss two very different paradigms for thinking about the relationship between the people who do the work and management, which is Taylorism and lean approaches to management. We'll talk about how to effectively motivate people and teams. We'll discuss culture. What is culture? How do we measure it? And how do we change it? And what are the obstacles to changing culture? We'll talk about some tools to help improve the performance of teams. And we'll discuss mindset and what mindset means for growing teams and growing people. But let's start by considering what a team actually is. Well, first of all, a team shares a common purpose. So when you have a team, they must be working towards a common goal and have a common purpose. And it's important that everyone knows what that is. So one of the things that you're going to do when you create a team is build a charter for a team. And again, this can be a kind of design thinking activity where you will collaborate to design the charter. And the charter should describe the team's purpose, what its goals are, the members of the team, the scope of the team, what's in scope and what's out of scope, reporting structures, supporting resources, what people you need to work with, stakeholders, and links to further resources. So whenever you create a new team, it's important to put together a charter and then put the charter in a place where everyone can easily find it. Your team may not correspond to your organization's reporting structures. So, for example, some organizations organize teams by function. So you have a testing team and a development team. Now, that may not be the group of people you need to get your job done. So one of your jobs as a product manager is to actually work out the set of people you need to get your work done end to end, from design to development to release to support to marketing to sales. Who are all those people? That's actually your team. And that may not correspond to your peers who report to your manager. And in fact, it almost certainly won't. There are organizations that do put true cross-functional teams together. If you go and watch Mary Poppendix talks about 3M, at 3M, teams were groups of around 30 people, which included everyone needed to develop and deliver a product, including all those people I just described, including the marketing people and the sales people. They would literally all sit together. That's very, very powerful because everybody you need to get your job done are literally sitting in the same area as you, and you can just go and talk to them. That's huge. It's incredibly powerful and it's very efficient. It's also very rare. So if you're not in that situation, you need to work out who your actual team is. Who are the people that you need in order to get your job done end to end? And you should find a way to create that virtual team and bring them together, work out that common purpose, develop a charter, even though they may all be on individual other teams within the organization. So that's something very important to do as a product manager. You will often need to work together with people who aren't in your reporting structure. So make sure you identify those people, get them together, build a virtual team, if you like, so that you have all the people you need and they know each other and they know what each other are responsible for and they can work together. And you can also build ad hoc teams that are limited in time just to achieve one particular goal and then disband them. That's a thing you can do. So get used to thinking about how you build teams, how you get people together to achieve a common purpose, because that's something that's crucial as a product manager, to be able to influence people who may not be in your reporting structure. Okay, so now we know what a team is. Let's discuss how teamwork applies in the context of delivering software-based products. Well, a lot of the focus in building software products is about things like processes and tools and documentation, but the very first principle of the Agile Manifesto says individuals and interactions. Those are literally the first three words in the manifesto after the preamble. So individuals and interactions are really, really important, and this is not well taught, it's not well discussed. In technology in particular, in software, we tend to hero worship developers who build stuff and sit in code. But actually, the people skills, which are sometimes somewhat disparagingly called the soft skills, are way more important than that. If you have a bunch of programmers who don't talk and don't discuss what they're doing with other people on the team, like UX and testers, and don't get customer feedback, you're never going to build great products. So these interactions are crucially important. Building a team which works effectively together, where people know what each other are doing, where we're all working towards a common goal, where we have good feedback loops, that's really important and a key part of your job as a product manager. So just a little bit of history on management in general. The first really scientific approach to management as a role was from this guy, Frederick Winslow Taylor, based on work that he did with industrial workers. And what he would do was what was called time and motion studies. So he would look at people doing a particular job and time them doing it and look at what they were doing and design the most efficient possible way for them to do their job. This led to this idea that the job of managers is to study the way that work is done and work out the most efficient way to do it, and then tell workers to do it, and then workers just follow the rules and do it the most efficient way. And we reward them based on the output of their work. So it's a very kind of carrot and stick approach to motivation, where if you follow the rules and you produce good output, you get rewarded, and if not, you don't. In the reading for this class, the further reading is a book called Drive by Dan Pink, and there's a short 10-minute video I recommend reviewing. And Dan Pink brings together a whole bunch of research in his book and talks about the importance of autonomy and mastery and purpose, and says that this kind of carrot and stick rewarding system actually backfires for knowledge work. This is true, but it's not very widely understood still, and people still behave as if you can use kind of carrot and stick motivation for people, and that the goal of management is to tell people what to do, and then the job of the people doing the work, the practitioners, is just to do what they're told. And this comes from Taylorism. There's some kinds of work where your job consists in following a recipe. That's called algorithmic work. An algorithm is basically a recipe where you just follow the instructions and do what the instructions say, and you will reliably produce the output that is desired. The other kind of work is called heuristic work. And heuristic work is where you have kind of principles and guidelines, but you have to experiment in order to work out the best way to do something. And the best way to do something is going to vary based on context and your goals and what you're doing right now. There's no such thing as best practice, which will always work in every situation. Product development, software development, these are forms of knowledge work, and people are going to have to work out what the best way to solve their problem is every time they do some kind of new work. It's heuristic. It's not algorithmic. There's no recipe you can follow. You will find everywhere people still behaving as if knowledge work was algorithmic. Anytime you hear people talk about best practice is an algorithm. It's a recipe that you can follow to get the right answer that will work in every situation. There is no such thing as best practice in knowledge work. There's principles you can follow, and there's heuristics you can use, problem-solving techniques. But there's no recipe you can follow to get the results. People always want a recipe. They want, here's the steps we're going to follow, and this will achieve the results. You don't have that. And that's why knowledge work is hard. And that's why you can't rely on a manager to work out the best way of doing it and then tell the workers to do it, because that doesn't work. You've got to harness the knowledge and skills of the people on the team to experiment, to find out the best way of working, and to keep doing that over and over as the team changes, as the problem we're solving changes, as our external environment changes. We're constantly adapting. And so it's much better to think about teams in this ecological metaphor, that we're constantly adapting to the environment and the environment is constantly changing. And we, as managers, have to help the team adapt effectively to whatever the best solution is at the time, which is going to keep changing. So the role of management in product development is not about telling people what to do. It's about helping the team adapt and evolve. And these words should sound familiar to you, because this is what Agile is all about as well. It's adaptive. So you did some preparation for this class. You listened to the NUMI case study, and the NUMI case study is a great example of how to apply the lean way of thinking about how to approach work and how to approach management, which is a very different paradigm from this Taylorist paradigm. One of the key thinkers in lean was W. Edwards Deming. He was a statistician who went to Japan after the Second World War to help Japanese industry develop. And his thinking was instrumental. He wrote a book called Out of the Crisis, which is one of the canonical books for thinking about lean approaches to management and to quality. And he has these 14 points, which you can go and read, and which you will actually be writing an essay on for your homework. You're going to pick one of Deming's 14 points and then write an essay about it. And these points are still pretty revolutionary even today. So, for example, number 11, eliminate numerical quotas for the workforce and numerical goals for management. Well, management by objective is still in use today, and the idea of rewarding people for meeting their quotas, for the output they achieve. Even at Google, I know people who've heard people say, well, let's look at the code that this person wrote. How big were their changes, or how complex were their changes? Well, it's not about output, it's about outcomes. We've talked about this. So rewarding people for output rather than whether they actually solved a problem effectively and their impact. People still do that. So this is still pretty revolutionary. Let's pick another example. In the practice of awarding business on price alone, instead minimize total cost by working with a single supplier. So again, in the NUMI example in part 2, they talked about how one of the reasons that GM had a problem implementing the Toyota production system was that they chose their suppliers based on the lowest cost, and then they couldn't develop long-term relationships with their suppliers because their suppliers knew that at any time, if they were no longer the lowest cost supplier, GM would dump them for someone else. So this practice of awarding contracts based on lowest cost is still very prevalent today. It's prevalent in procurement, and it prevents you developing relationships with your suppliers and achieving win-win solutions. Very, very common still. So that's just 2 examples. There's many examples of how these points for management are still not widely adopted, and people still flout them all the time or don't realize the true significance and importance of these principles. So I really recommend going and reading the longer versions of these principles by following this link at the bottom. You'll need to do that anyway to do your homework, to do your assignment, but they're still very revolutionary and powerful. So having discussed a bit about the history of the evolution of what it means to effectively manage people, let's go back to how you manage effectively. So I think as a manager, it's really important to ask yourself these 3 questions on a regular basis. Firstly, how can I as a manager help my org be more effective? So there's a piece of management which is an outward facing piece, which is me and my team. How can we best support the organization? And indeed, how can the organization best support us? So first of all, you've got to work out, what can my team do to help support the org? What are the organization's objectives for the next year, for the next quarter? And what can my team do to help achieve those objectives? And then there's an inward facing piece, which is how can I help my team become more effective? What can I do to support my team better, to help my team develop, and to help the individuals on my team develop as well? So how can I help my team become more effective? And then finally, there's a self-development piece, which is how can I become more effective? What can I do to get better at my job? And so in the same way that you're helping the people on your team grow in their careers, you have to work out how you can grow in your career and how you can become more effective at helping the team and helping the organization. So there are many jobs of management, but I just want to focus on a few of them which are particularly crucial to be an effective manager. First of all, you have to establish and communicate the goals for your team. We talked about medium range planning in our release planning module. That's what this is about. So make sure that your team has medium range goals, that it knows what those are, and that it knows how those relate to the organization goals. You cannot over communicate this. It absolutely bears repetition. This is what helps your team become aligned and helps your organization become aligned. Everyone on your team should know whether what they're doing is the most important thing they can be doing at any time. And you should be able to ask them, how does what you're doing contribute to the organization's goals? And they should be able to say, well, what I'm doing contributes to this team level goal in our OKRs, for example, and that contributes to this organization level goal. So as a manager, it's your job to make sure that your team knows what they're working towards, how to measure whether they're done with that or how far along they are with that, and what they need to actually achieve that. Which brings us to our second point. The team needs to have the right resources and skills to actually achieve those goals. So again, it's your job as a manager to make sure that the team has the resources it needs, which may be training, it may be time, it may be the support of other teams in the organization, it may be skills. So if there's a mismatch between the skills on the team and the skills needed to achieve the goals of the team, you need to help the people on the team acquire those new skills, which may be giving them training or sending them to conferences or buying them books. Whatever it is, you need to help the team acquire those skills. The best way to acquire skills is to set people or your team a problem which requires the acquisition of those skills. And that's generally what happens in knowledge work. New technologies emerge all the time. You're never going to be able to hire all the people you need, so you need to make sure that the team has time to go and actually acquire those new skills required to solve that problem. So make sure you set aside time and resources for that. That's very important. When you do that, that's part of creating what's called a learning organization. Third, you need to help identify and remove obstacles which prevent the team from achieving their work. So in the daily stand-up meeting, we talk about those three questions. What did I do yesterday? What did I do today? The third question is, what obstacles am I facing? So this is crucially important because as a manager, you need to help unblock the team. So when those obstacles come up, those obstacles may be outside the team, and it's your job as a manager to work with the rest of the organization to unblock the team. Fourth, it's not just about helping the team grow, it's about helping individuals on the team grow. So you should be having one-on-ones with all the people who report to you weekly. And in those one-on-one meetings, one of the things you should talk about is, what does that person want to do in the medium term and the long term? Where do they see themselves? What new things do they want to learn? What are they passionate about? What do they care about? Not just in a professional environment, but also outside that. And your job is to help support the people on your team. That's a crucial piece of line management. When you see a big mismatch between what that person's passionate about and their career path and the work they're doing, you've basically got two options. You can either realign the work they're doing to make it more in line with what that person wants to do, or maybe there's no work on your team that helps them do that. And so you need to help that person find another team where they can do work that they're passionate about. And it's not just your responsibility to do that. it's the job of the person on the team to find something that they're more passionate about. But you should at least be having those conversations and know if there's a big mismatch, because that's going to create a problem for that person and for the team. And then finally, you need to champion the work of the team. It's your job to represent your team to the rest of the organization and make sure the organization knows what they're doing and knows why it's important and celebrates your team's successes and helps unblock your team. It's very easy for teams to kind of slide into the background and for no one to know about them. And then it's very hard for them to get rewarded at performance review time and by getting promotions and so forth. So you need to champion the work of your team so that people know why what they're doing is valuable and how they're helping the organization succeed. So this is not a complete list of the things that you need to be an effective manager, but it's some of the really key things that it's easy to lose track of in the day-to-day of let's get our work done.